This follower wrote in to tell me the story of a piece of land their family recently got in Huntsville, Arkansas. There was a project going on this land before their family got it, and everyone dropped the project and left, like in the middle of the project, left. So the land had water and electricity running to it, but just the houses had not been built yet. About a month after they get there and move in, strange things start happening. There was weird noises, things would go missing, and it happened so much that our follower decided... Sorry about that. One of my cats jumped up to the top, and they're fine, but they landed up there very loudly. Anyways, things were happening so much that our follower decided to look up the address and found out that this land was actually indigenous land. Pretty soon after this, their brother started to hear his name being called from the woods. And then after that, knocking began happening repeatedly on the door. So one night they had their friend over and they decided to sleep outside. And sidebar, I read that and I was like, why would you sleep outside with all of that activity happening? And then I remembered that I grew up on a very haunted piece of land myself, and me and my friends did that all the time. Like, we would sleep outside. We would get pillows and blankets and just put them in the back of my dad's truck and just sleep in the middle of a hayfield. So I get it. So anyways, they're outside trying to fall asleep and they start hearing a noise. Like, it sounded like something trying to imitate an animal-like noise, but they just didn't get it completely right. Then things went silent. Everything stopped around them. And then the follower said they heard a noise that they couldn't even put into words, and they bolted back into the house. That following winter, they would actually find some pretty strange footprints in the snow. Much like that noise, it was just almost human, but something was off. Something was trying its best, but it was not trying hard enough, because you could tell. I don't understand why Jinx won't just pick up or down, but we're probably gonna hear that noise a lot. I think she has zoomies, so she's jumping around. They also wanted me to remind you guys to keep your blinds closed at night, because one night they didn't, and they came face to face with something that they shouldn't have. And they did send me pictures of the footprints, so let's check them out.
So it's October 1st, and y'all already know I have a creepy story to tell you about a case that I worked here in East Texas. This one takes me into the deep woods of East Texas, where history and voodoo very much still leaves their mark. So October of last year, I was hired by a family here in East Texas to investigate their land. They had it in their mind that somebody had cursed their land because cows would turn up dead, okay? Voodoo dolls would be left on their porch, I shit you not, and strange ass symbols were carved into trees around the property. Very strange stuff. Now keep in mind, I'm also a spiritual girly and have been all my life, passed down from generation to generation, because my mom is from Louisiana and my whole entire family is from Louisiana. And I'm not talking about the glorified Louisiana. I'm talking about the pig, Latin, French speaking, swamp riding, alligator wrestling parts of Louisiana. Okay, the Creole folks. That's where my people are from. So I never did think I would be investigating something like this that kind of hits home for me. Now, most people think of voodoo of being just a Louisiana thing. And to be honest, it's not. In the early 1800s, enslaved people would bring their beliefs across the Sabine River into East Texas. And that kind of the beliefs mixed up with the local other black folklore and kind of created this Texas Southern style voodoo. So we had got to the property and we got everything set up, and we probably started walking the property maybe around 12 at night. You know what I'm saying? We wanted to make sure that it was not no kids playing around, playing jokes on somebody. They wouldn't do it during the day. They would do it at nighttime really late. And I seen a white figure walking the tree line by the house. And me and my partner, we went towards it. And whenever we got to where we kind of seen that white figure at, it was a voodoo doll nailed to a tree. This thing had its mouth literally sewn shut, the eyes sewn shut, and it was nailed to a tree. Now what kills me about this voodoo doll is it had herbs wrapped around it. Now, I dabble in herbs. I burn my sage and Palo Santo and dragon's blood and all that stuff just like everybody else. But keep in mind, when we went by this tree, there was nobody there. Just this doll nailed to the tree. The herbs were fresh and out of the family's garden. And the families had cameras, and nobody was in that garden for weeks because of everything that's going on. So y'all already know me. I did my research. And it turns out that this land that they done bought used to be a plantation. Then on top of that, the next day, one of the cows passed away unexpectedly, and they still could not figure out what happened. I got my ass the hell up out of there, okay? I went straight to my mother, my elders, my ancestors, and asked them to protect me after that point, okay? Because that was one of the most scariest cases that I ever have to deal with, only because it touches home. It touches home. And I still refuse to go that way anywhere. Like, if I gotta go to Dallas, you will not see me go down through this road near where this land is. I refuse. I will not.
TikTok apparently doesn't like me talking about this, so we're gonna try again. I'm going to tell you about the Devil's Tree in Port St. Lucie, Florida. This tree has been voted by multiple magazines as the most haunted place in Florida. It's located in Okamic Park, Port St. Lucie, and you can see the scar on it from where multiple people tried to cut down the tree to no avail. Someone even tried to burn the tree down, only for the fire to go out almost immediately. The monster behind the legend is this dude right here, Gerard Schaefer. In 1972, he killed 2 women at the Devil's Tree, but he has boasted to multiple people that there were several more victims. His MO was kidnapping women who were hitchhiking, tying them up, gagging them, hanging them from the tree, and then slicing their throat and decapitating them. Yeah, he was sick. Gerard used his power as a sheriff for Martin County to lure women into a false sense of security. The only reason he was caught was because one night when he had kidnapped 2 women, he got called away on a dispatch. He left them hanging from the tree, tied up but alive. They managed to escape. This next picture I'm going to show you may be triggering, so warning. On July 21st, 1972, Gerard picked up Nancy Trotter, this woman, and Paula Sue Wells. These were the 2 women who managed to escape. This is a picture of Nancy reenacting how Gerard had them bound and gagged before they were able to get away. He had repeatedly told them that he would sell them into prostitution or make them watch each other die. When he got back to the tree and realized that they had escaped, he called the station and told them that he had done something foolish. He said he was just trying to teach them a lesson for hitchhiking. The station obviously didn't believe him, stripped him of his badge, and arrested him. One of the most frustrating parts of this story is that after posting bail, Gerard killed 2 more women. They were 16 and 17 years old, and he wasn't charged for it for another year. Because he was on the loose for so long, it's impossible to say how many victims he really had. But even after he was imprisoned, the bad energy and just strange events around the Devil's Tree continued. There have been sightings of cults over the years around the tree, trying to appease whatever force surrounds it. According to local legend, one man tried to take an axe to the tree, and the axe head came off and hit him in the head, killing him instantly. A priest was even called to try to exorcise the tree, and obviously it did not work. People have gone at night to spot orbs, apparitions, and other strange things that they could not explain at this tree. But to end on a happy note, Gerard died in jail in 1995.
Right now you're walking with me into the sunset to go get some eggs from my chickens. The land that I am walking on is very, very haunted. The right of me was once an old sawmill, and all of this area was super thick pine groves. And as the people were logging, like the 1850s, 60s, there was at least 150 deaths in this little part of the woods right here. Feels like there's eyes just staring at me. Over there on that side, right behind those trees, there's actually a cemetery. It butts up to my land over there. Underneath that cemetery, it was built on top of two other cemeteries. There was a French fort and a Spanish fort on top of it, which is also where they buried their dead. So a Native American cemetery as well on my piece of property. There were many attacks from the natives as they were coming in to try to make the Spanish and the French leave. There were many a battle on this ground. Not to mention all of this land right here was once a plantation. There's a creek that runs through my property. There have been many drownings in this. Well, hello girls, how are you? Penelope, don't be angry. Look at all of our eggs we have today. So all in all these spirits are here. Oh, not to mention, last year in October, there was two people that got into a car accident. They were on a moped and there was a car that was coming the other way. They decided to go head on into this car. And the two people on the moped passed right on my driveway. For weeks, even months after this accident happened, she would come into my bathroom. I would see her in my mind. And she would show up on my spirit box every single day until finally she stopped. She realized it was okay to cross over. And Amanda is buried in that cemetery right there.
I was sent a story from one of you guys asking for advice, and while I did give them advice, I want to see if you guys have anything to add. The story is pretty creepy and has a really heavy energy, so keep that in mind. If this is not your thing, don't listen. But let's get on into it. So this story takes place at this follower's grandparents' house where they reside and a few other family members also reside. The follower is a practicing pagan and most of the other family members are devout Christians. So back in 2021, this follower would hear things running outside and these things sounded heavy. And not only that, they were hearing their name when no one was calling their name. So they would ignore, light incense to cleanse, and give their gods offerings for protection. As I said, they're pagan. Small stuff would continue happening and then it stopped. It stopped for an entire year. And now we're picking back up in August of 2022. Them, their brother, and their sister began hearing their names being called when no one was calling them. They would go on walks and just know for a fact they were being followed. And it got so bad that they started bringing 2 out of their 4 dogs with them. They would also hear their names being called on these walks and the dogs would stop dead in their tracks. Also, so it would happen at the same time, but the follower would hear their name and their brother would hear their name. It's almost like a mind trick. So sadly, this follower's grandfather passed away and things amped up. They and their brother began seeing a large dog, or what they thought was a dog. Luckily, the brother was right beside of the door and was able to run inside, but this has happened twice, and the follower has also seen this dog. The second time they saw it up close, and they described it as it looked like someone was wearing a dog suit. Their dog started going crazy, so they ran inside and locked the doors because they were outside when that happened. I would just never leave my house again. They went inside, did some protection rituals, and hid jars around their home. This follower also said their cousin who lives out of town put a big protection around the area, and they think that is the only reason that no one's gotten grabbed. And I definitely agree. So they said these jars made them feel better than they have felt in a very long time. So they said anytime they do a protection ritual, do work with their gods, it dies down for a month or 2 and then comes back, which is also what happens to me. And they're concerned because their grandmother's in the house and they just want everyone to be safe. I told them I think a revamp of the protection jars would be good. If they can get that cousin back in to do another cleansing or find out exactly what they did and do it, that would also be good. Also, ignoring everything and lining doors and windows with salt and selenite is also a good idea. So my question is, do you guys have any more advice? I'm sure they'll be reading these comments, so just leave them below. And yeah, Be nice, be respectful, and be helpful.
It's Appalachia Spooky Story Time, y'all, and this story is very different than my others, which is exactly why I chose it, and I want to know what you all think about it. This story comes from one of my followers named Katie. It is pretty terrifying. If you are scared easily and you're watching this at night, I would just save it and wait until the morning. Katie said she grew up in the Midwest, but when she was in 7th grade, her family moved to Western North Carolina. It was her dad, her mom, her sister, and her. Katie said that they moved into this very old farmhouse, and even though it was an older farmhouse, it was quite big. And she said that they had a lot of woods back on the property. There was some field areas where there was some farmland, things like that. But directly from her room, because she was on the 2nd story, she had a window and she could see out into the back of the woods. Just a few feet into the woods, there was an old shed, and she could see the shed from her bedroom window. She said the shed always kind of creeped her out a little bit because it was old, it was back in the woods, and just gave her weird feelings. But she noticed almost every evening her dad would go out into the shed. Sometimes he would only be out there for a few minutes, and then sometimes he would be in this shed for like hours and had no idea what he was doing. She said occasionally she would look out her window and would see lights on in the shed, and so she knew her dad was in there. One morning she looked out her window and there was a big padlock that had been added on to the shed. She thought this was really odd, so she asked her dad about it, and her dad basically told her and her sister that he put the padlock on there to keep people from breaking in because he had some tools that were stolen out of the shed. Then as he was going to leave, he looked back at her and her sister and was like, "Yeah, I don't ever want you all going near that shed." They're like, "Why? What's up with the shed?" And he was like, "Don't ask questions. I'm your dad. Just listen to me. I don't want you all near the shed." Here's where things get really odd though. She said one evening she saw her dad go down to the shed. That was pretty normal. She goes to bed, but in the middle of the night she wakes up because she hears her mom screaming her dad's name. She wakes up and she's like, "Mom, what is going on?" And she's like, "I can't find your dad. He never came back from the shed." Mom was like, "I'm gonna go check the shed. You girls just stay in here and I will be right back." Within just a matter of minutes, her mom comes running back through the door and calls an ambulance because she had found her husband slumped over in the shed. While they're waiting on the ambulance, all 3 of them run out to the shed and they're with the dad while he is just like slumped over. He is alive, but he's just not acting right. The ambulance gets there and they say only one person can ride in the ambulance with the dad, so the wife went and she told the daughters just to wait at the house and to take the day off school. Guys, this is so weird. After they leave to go to the hospital, the 2 girls stay and they're like looking in the shed and there's nothing in there. You know how she said she always saw a light on in the shed? There was no electricity in the shed. There was no lanterns, no electricity. It said hanging on the walls, there was like bird feathers and some rabbit feet. And there was like a small work desk with a few carving knives and a notebook. She said when she opened up the notebook, she saw her father's handwriting in there, but then on other pages, the handwriting was completely different. And it was all just like mumbled jargon that she couldn't understand. And then written in the floorboards were like carvings of different symbols. Some of them looked very fresh. Some of them looked super, super old. Her and her sister were super freaked out, felt very unsettled, and just went back into the house. Her dad was eventually discharged from the hospital and was diagnosed with having a stroke. So he came home, he had to walk with a cane, but ultimately was okay. She told her mom about what she found in the shed, so the mom confronted the dad. Apparently the dad just wouldn't talk about it. He just shut down, would not talk about what was in the shed. She said she started to hear her parents fighting a lot, like late at night. The one thing that her dad was always adamant about was that he wanted to continue to go down to the shed, even with his cane, even with like his disability from having the stroke. He was like adamant in the evenings that he still wanted to go out to the shed, and that was the main source of arguments from her parents. Okay, but then it gets even more bizarre. Eventually, months and months and months later, her dad got pneumonia. He was already declining from his stroke. He ended up passing away. After her dad's passing, Katie, her mom, and her sister ended up moving to a smaller home in the city, but she always wondered about that shed, like she couldn't stop thinking about it. Katie and her sister decided to do some research on the home. Turns out this home had had multiple owners over the last 20 years. Like almost every year, the house was put up for sale and bought by someone else. She tried to contact a couple of the previous owners just to like get more information about why they sold the home, anything odd that happened, whatever. And nobody would talk to her. Everyone, as soon as she started asking, just shut down and refused to speak to her. Except for one woman who said that her husband had also suffered a stroke in the shed. She said to this day she has not returned to the property. She does not intend to, but she knows that there is something evil inside of that shed. What do you all think happened here? Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you want more spooky stories, then just follow along.
So this is a scratch from the Bell Witch Cave in Adams, Tennessee. Let's talk about it, because that's my husband's neck that it's on. So this past weekend, myself, my husband, and one of my friends went to the Bell Witch Cave in Adams, Tennessee, and it was mine and my husband's second time there. I have talked extensively about the first time that I went. I can lay it all out in a video if you guys like. I've just told little stories. I had a wonderful time. I didn't feel anything negative there. There was only like one instance where I was frightened. It felt so safe. But I can say the energy was not the same this time. The first time we went, we were actually in the cave and on the farm for several hours, I think 6 hours to be exact, with the paranormal investigation team, Black Wolf Paranormal, that's in charge of all of the investigations there, and they were lovely. This time we did a public tour. Okay, I planned on going there to ride the haunted hayride and to do a little tour. I was too scared of the haunted hayride, so I didn't do that. But I did the cave tour and the cabin tour because my friend had never been. I promise there's a reason for me saying all of this, and it is not to demonize this place, so don't even go there. So we get to the farm, we buy our tickets to do the tours, and we go to the cabin first. And the cabin is actually a replica of the Bell's family home because it no longer exists. We did have some experiences in there, and by we, I literally just mean my husband. I didn't have anything happen in there, but he went upstairs, heard what he thought was me call him honey. I don't even call him honey, because I was behind him on the stairs, and he froze, turned and said, "Yes." And I was like, "Hello?" He was like, "Did you say something?" I didn't. So he turns back around and goes back downstairs, declared the energy was off up there, and we left the cabin. Next up, we head down to the cave, and that is where I have an experience. As we're walking down to the cave, to the woods beside of us, I hear running. And in my mind, I see what looks to be a very thin young woman, pretty tall, with black hair, wearing kind of like a tank top white dress or gown, just bolting with bare feet beside of us. I could not see her face. That is so important. So we stand there for a second, wait for the other group to get out of the cave, and then we head inside. We go into the first room where I have my back to the opening hallway, which was very brave of me. Go me. That was crazy for me to do. But the whole time I'm standing there, I am hearing something run back and forth. So much so that it's prompting me to look behind me several times because I don't know if someone needs help. What are we running from? Do I need to go deeper into the cave? At the same time this is happening, my friend is standing beside of me but also kind of in front of me, and she's feeling something heavy on her shoulder, like a man's heavy hand or something. So then we move to the back room. This is the room where that same friend who felt something on her shoulder was nearly shoved off of the top rocks in the back room. So when you go back there, you're encouraged to do a little bit of climbing to go on top of the rocks, and they show you some really cool stuff. I stayed at the bottom because I fell the last time. I've seen up there, I'm cool. At the same time, I don't know she's being pushed on her hip, but from the direction that her hip was pointed at, I'm hearing some stuff behind that rock, so much so that I was like, someone's back there doing some weird stuff. So then we head out of the cave, the tour is over, and we're outside of the cave. We've already went back up to the top, and we're talking with the guides. And we hear a shot, a very close shot. I want to preface this by saying on the haunted hayride, they were firing blanks. And we are in the middle of the wilderness. Not in the wilderness, we're just in the middle of a rural area. If someone was doing that, it's whatever, right? The shot sounded off. I know what those sounds like, and I had been hearing the blanks fired. It sounded off, first of all, but it was also really close, and the haunt wasn't happening that close to us. It sounded right there. The woman that I saw in my head running that looked a little bit off, that wouldn't let me see her face, and now this shot sounding weird. So after this, we head to the bookshop. I get 2 really cool books, and we head back to our hotel that's 20 minutes away. We talk for a bit, we go to sleep. I wake up in the middle of the night. I have no idea what time it is because my phone was on the other side of the room charging. I look up and I see this very tall, kind of wide, black figure pacing around my friend's bed beside of us. So I look at this thing for a second, it freezes, seems to look at me, I don't know, I couldn't see a face, but it's freezing in my direction, and just dissipates in front of me. I don't know if that was related to the cave or if we just stayed in a haunted hotel and I didn't even know it, but that did happen. So I have a few theories, and I can't take credit for this very first one because my friend on here that goes by Paranormal Tej did the first one. This is a very energy-rich place, not only from what all is already there, but from the people that visit. We all have our own energies that we bring there and we can leave them. It's a whole situation, but it is a melting pot for energy. Our group was just one group out of many, and there was several people in our group. And like I said, they're constantly rotating. That's a lot of energy in an already energy-rich place. We didn't know who we were with. We don't know the energies they're bringing, and that can create chaos, like I said, in an already energy-rich place. Another theory that I had is that we were told when we were there by Kate, who's a spirit that resides there that was treated very badly while she was alive, that she does not love visitors. So it would make sense that we had a negative experience while the spirits that are there don't like it. We know the spirits that are already there do not like this constant attention. It's happening a lot in October, so it would make sense that negative things would happen because they're not happy and they're trying to adjust to this new schedule. I also have this theory about whatever was running at me on the way down. I think it was a creature that takes on the appearance and sounds of other things, 100%. And that was kind of confirmed by some of the people that work there. They casually were like, oh, we have a mimic because all this stuff happens here, and it was very much mimicking activities. And I don't think this was the first time we encountered this on that property, because I think I told the story on here. When we were down on the property by the Red River, we heard what sounded like a coyote at first, but then everything was off and it was suddenly surrounding and circling us, and it stopped the second we got away from the Red River. We're not supposed to be here. We need to leave.
Yeah, I'm done with that. That's like screaming and chanting and howling.
Yeah.
Nope.
We're leaving. We're so sorry. Almost like we stumbled somewhere we weren't supposed to be. So my advice is you should always go into a haunted location with your guard up, but if you choose specifically to go to the Bell Witch farm whenever they're doing public activities, maybe keep it up a little bit higher. Go in with positive intentions and respect. Make it known to these things that you do not want to hurt them or cause them any sort of bad feelings. You're just there to learn and to experience. If you have the time and the money, I recommend 100% doing a private investigation, especially with Black Wolf Paranormal. They are fantastic. I can do a whole separate video on the packages they offer and things like that. Totally not sponsored. I just went, and the information's kind of confusing, so I would happily lay that out and tell you what all we did. Just let me know.
Want to get creeped out? This is creepy. There is a small town in Wisconsin called St. Naciance. Sorry. Feel free to yell at me. I did look it up, but it just made it worse. Anyways, this town has a very eerie history. The town was founded by a priest named Father Ambrose Oswald. He fled religious persecution in Germany and arrived in Wisconsin in 1854. So he fled because he was not only a priest, but also a mystic. He believed that he possessed a gift of healing, and he also studied the properties of plants and herbs. So the Roman Catholic Church had suspended him due to his mystical, prophetic, and heretical works. However, his congregation followed him. They really believed in him, and they formed a society called the Association, based on communal living and shared property. The priest passed away in 1873, and strange events began to unfold. The residents of the town started to report mysterious pounding on the walls of their homes, and this was happening throughout the whole town. His body, when viewed before the burial, showed no signs of decay. His skin was said to have a lifelike complexion, and his hair and fingernails had continued to grow, which that happens. The complexion thing is weird. A judge even warned against burying him, not believing that this priest was truly dead. His tomb has since become a topic of fascination and fear. Over the years, the town has faced multiple natural disasters and numerous bizarre occurrences. The events have contributed to the town's reputation of being one of the most haunted towns in Wisconsin. It was 53 years after he passed away that his complexion was still great, which is really strange. There was also a man named Anton that stayed with the priest while he was sick and while he was dying. During that time, he would see the priest gesturing to invisible people. He would extend his hand in blessing and then signal someone away, yet Anton saw no one else in the room. The night that he passed away, there was mysterious pounding on his walls as well. His tomb wasn't yet complete, so he wasn't buried immediately. So he passed away February 26th. On April 29th, they examined him before placing him into the chamber. His body had not decayed. There was no odor of corruption. His eyes had sunken in, but he still had a lifelike complexion with growing hair and fingernails. A huge shout out to Lauren, who got me pictures of this place and even told me about it because I had no idea, and I've tagged her in this video. And thank you, Lauren. You are the best. Anyways, have you guys ever heard of this? I haven't heard of most things, so I might be late to the party. Anyways, see you next time.
Yeah. Welcome to Hoodoo Month, you heard me? You already know what's Zam. Time to pay homage. So you know we gotta talk about my baby Julia Brown. Miss Julia Brown curse? The lady who wiped out the whole town. Now, Julia Brown was born in Louisiana, 1845, in St. Bernard. And she married a man named Celestin Brown in 1880. Now, about 20 years later, after they got married, the federal government gave her husband 40 acres of land. But when her husband died, the land was passed over to Julia Brown. Now, the Census Bureau don't make any mentions of Julia Brown's voodoo work, which isn't surprising, especially during the time where they didn't even want us practicing the things that we was practicing anyway, you heard me? Now, a modern New Orleans voodoo priest is today named Bloody Mary. She told Mental Floss that she basically found records of a Brown, who some consider the voodoo priestess who worked in New Orleans around the 1860s. Now, this was before she moved to Lake Frenier, a small town in Louisiana. Now, before she moved to Frenier, basically she was a local doctor in New Orleans helping people with her root work. Now, the town Frenier is about a half hour west of New Orleans and basically is rich with thick swamp ooze. In the summer, the water is pea green and covered in leaves. Nothing but insects and ghosts that hide beneath the cypress trees in the forest. So those who are entering in the swamps faced a bunch of threats: dehydration, sunstroke, and having to deal with the alligators and the animals amongst the jungle. Now, they say anybody that's entering the swamp need to be aware of all of the supernatural things that take place in the swamp. But that shit didn't matter to Miss Julia Brown because Miss Julia Brown lived in the swamp, on the edges of it. Now, Miss Julia Brown would work with residents throughout the town, and that would help them with root work, healing, spiritual healing, psychological healing. And they said she was known for her curses and her charms, as well as singing eerie songs on her front porch. She had her little guitar. She'd be singing a certain song on her front porch. People was afraid of that song. Now, the song she was singing was basically, one day she's going to die, she's going to take the whole town with her, you heard me? Frenier were prosperous settlements clustered on the edge of Lake Pontchartrain, which is sustained by the logging of centuries of old cypress trees. Go look up what them cypress trees is, you heard me? And also farming cabbages and thick black soil. Now, the railroad was the town's lifeline, which was bringing in groceries from New Orleans, hauling in all type of resources all the way to Chicago. Now, they had no roads, no electricity, and no doctors, but for somehow they carved out a beautiful community, which was very cohesive and self-reliant. Now, on September 29, 1915, a massive hurricane swept in from the Caribbean. In Frenier, where Julia lived, the storm rose 13 feet, and the winds howled at 125 miles per hour. Many of the townsfolk sought refuge in the railroad depot. And that collapsed and killed at least 25 to 30 people. So altogether, at least 300 people in Louisiana died that day. Frenier, Rudon, and Neptune had been entirely wiped out. Homes flattened, buildings demolished, and miles of railroad tracks washed away. Now, one of the few survivors basically talked about how he stuck to a cypress tree, which actually saved his life. And during that time, he could hear all of the people who were screaming, who was basically getting drowned in the swamps. Now, some people think the hurricane coming out of nowhere, but the people who come from the town call it the Julia Brown curse. So they say Brown basically put a curse on the town because she felt taken for granted. Everybody wanted to use her for her healing and her root work, but they would basically dismiss her when it was to see her out. Now, this the crazy thing. The storm came on the day of her funeral. Now, some people say that the song Julia Brown was singing on her porch was more so of a warning to the townspeople, that she was basically trying to save them. And they also say that Julia Brown actually tried to perform an anti-storm ritual, but she was unable to stop the storm before it was too late.
I'm not supposed to talk about what happens at boarding school, so please keep me anonymous. This story came from someone we'll call Abby, and Abby says she was born and raised in Alaska and has always lived there until about 2 years ago when her parents shipped her off to boarding school in Montana. But Abby says she was not a good student, she was always getting into trouble, and so the day after Christmas of 2023, she got kicked out. And if you got kicked out of that boarding school, they sent you to something called wilderness therapy in Utah. Abby had heard some of the girls in her boarding school talk about wilderness therapy, but she just thought it was, hiking, camping, pooping in the woods. But she said she was excited to go. She wanted to get the hell out of Montana. And so when they came to pick her up, it was 3 a.m. and she was excited. She's like, let's do this. It was a 14-hour drive to the base. And when she got there, they took her height, weight, they took all of her vitals, gave her gear and said, get in the van. We got about an hour drive and it's 84 miles to the closest town. She says they drove her to the middle of bum F nowhere, and it was down a bumpy road. It was dark out, but up on the mountain she could see a light, and they said, that's the camp. That's where you're going to be staying. They get up there. They show her yurt, which she said is basically a giant tent which can sleep up to 5 people. She gets to bed, and in the morning she's greeted by the other 4 girls she's sharing this yurt with, as well as the 3 staff who were on duty, and these staff would rotate every 2 to 3 days. The first group of staff she's with is 3 women, and they teach her how to cook her food, how to stay warm, how to do everything she needed around camp. She said they were very nice and she didn't think anything about where she was or the native land that they were staying on. But come that first Tuesday, the staff switched out and a man and a woman come to camp. This pair of staff members were a little more wild. They were talking to these girls about all of the crazy things they experienced out in the wilderness. And Abby and her friends in the yurt just thought that they were kidding with them, trying to scare them. Abby said it did kind of scare her because her and another girl in the yurt were native and they had heard of some of these creatures that these staff members were talking about in their elder legends, but they didn't want to give it too much thought. One night, she, her friend, and the female staff member all had to use the bathroom, so they had to walk along this path to go to the outhouse. She said the outhouse was a little ways away, but it was pitch black outside and the only illumination was from the moon. So she, her friend, will call Emily, and then this female staff member that will call Stella are all walking down this path to the outhouse when all of a sudden Stella starts shushing the girls. The girls are looking at her like, what's going on? What's going on? And she says, keep your eyes down. Don't look up. So of course, both the girls look up and about 8 feet behind them, they see a shadow figure walking down the path behind them. Abby screams, Emily screams, and Stella continues shushing them, say, don't pay it any attention. Keep your eyes down. Keep your eyes down. Stay calm. Stella's whispering to them, don't pay it any attention. If you don't pay it any attention, it can't hurt you. Keep your eyes on the ground. Cannot interact with them. If you ignore them, they'll go away. So the girls kept their eyes on the ground the entire walk back. When they got back, they told the other girls what they had seen. And Stella says, this happens all the time out here. You have to heed my warnings. Going to bed that night, Abby said she could not sleep at all. She kept hearing whispering outside the tent, even though all the girls were accounted for. There was a staff member in the tent who stayed up nights with them to make sure no one tried to escape or harm themselves. But the rest of the adult camp was about 5 minutes away. She said she heard whispering all night, but the staff member said they couldn't hear it, and it continued after that night. She barely got any sleep. A month later, she woke up in the middle of the night to hear something moving around the tent, and the other girls got up as well. It sounded like footsteps. They called for the other staff over the camera, and the staff said they couldn't hear anything, and it must just be snow falling off the yurt. She says it wasn't effing snow. There was somebody outside the tent that night. Another night, she woke up with intense pressure on her chest, but the worst came later. She had fallen back asleep but woken up again because the pressure on her chest was so much she couldn't bear it, and she heard a whisper. She said it sounded like a smoker who had smoked 20 cigarettes a day for 30 years. It whispered my name. She said it was raspy, it was real, it was right next to my head. The night staff again said that they didn't hear anything and just to go back to sleep. She said other things happened all the time. She wasn't the only one who experienced it. One night they were sitting around a fire and a girl started crying because she said, look at that shadow person standing next to the yurt. There was a boys' camp not far from theirs, and one night staff members were all called because the boys were complaining about hearing laughing outside the tent. When they did a head count, all the boys were in the tent. She says by far the scariest night was one night they were going to hike up a mountain to cook dinner on the mountain, and they climbed the mountain, they watched the sun go down, it was pitch black. They began to hike down, and it was so dark they had to hold on to each other's backpacks to get down the mountain. She said it was so dark you couldn't see 3 feet in front of you. There were 5 girls and 3 staff, but when they counted heads, there was a 9th body in the chain. She says they never found out who it was, and the staff just accepted this as something normal that happened all the time in the Utah wilderness. She said, I'm back home in Alaska now. I'm so happy to be out of there, but I think it's important to remind people that those are native lands and we weren't there first. She ended her email by saying, I swear this really happened. If you go out there, please remember to be respectful. If you have a spooky, scary story time, I would love to hear it. I try to post a new one almost every single day.